before I even drove up here tonight, I was going to tell you that I'm going through a difficult time. This has been a hard fall for me. A lot of different reasons. I could list a whole bunch of them, but it's been a hard fall. And it's been 4.5 years since Matthew died. This is my 5th Christmas without him. And so I'm here with you as someone whose heart is wounded and aching. And for some of you, this may be the first Christmas. I've talked to some of you, and I know that for some of you, this is the first Christmas, the first holiday season since your loved one passed away. For some of you, it's been a few years. And for some of you, your loss has been many years in the past. But the holidays are just always a poignant reminder that someone you dearly love is no longer here. So whether your loss is fresh or it's distant, I just want you to know that this really is a safe place. And I'm going to cry. I already have. So if you want to cry, if you want to be silent, if you want to sing or you don't want to sing or you don't want to talk or you don't want to smile and pretend that everything is okay, it's perfectly fine. You need some place during the holidays where you don't have to paste the smile on, where you don't have to be the Energizer Bunny who's going 90 miles a minute. You don't have to refrain from saying the name of your loved one who is not here. Everybody needs, during the holidays in particular, a safe place to not pretend, to not have to fake it at all. And so that's partially why we wanted to have this, so that whatever you're going through, whatever loss you're experiencing, at least there's going to be one place during these times, these holiday season, that you can. You don't have to fake it with anybody. You can just be and feel whatever it is you're feeling. Hopefully, as Dave said, you may shed a few tears. Hopefully, you'll get some hugs. Hopefully that when you leave tonight, you'll feel a little more strengthened in your ability, God's ability to help you move through this holiday season. Well, obviously we're in Advent and Christmas season, but grief and mourning don't know a season. Grief and mourning transcend seasons. But birthdays and anniversaries and holidays and celebratory days, particularly I think Christmas, they turn up the volume on grief. They just turn up the volume, amplifying the pain and the loss that we feel. And Christmas is such a sensory holiday. You know, there's sights and there's smells and there's sounds, and you can walk into a house or a room or a building or a store in the mall or somebody else's house, and the smell of a particular cookie or the smell of a particular food that brings back memories of Christmases past, or your grandmother who made this particular thing, or your mom or your dad or your wife, or something that your kid did. You see a movie on TV, and a movie can remind you of something that somebody else loved. It just, so there's sights and there's sounds and there's smells, and there's more opportunities for us as we are feeling loss and feeling sadness to really experience and have that raw nerve of pain be exposed, and memories of Christmases past, you know, with someone that we love just stirs up these powerful longings within us. And I know for me that sometimes the missing, I just miss Matthew so much. And that missing is almost more than it feels like I can bear. And if you're in that kind of a place where you are thinking and remembering someone that you love, that's a pretty common experience. When people tell me their stories, frequently I hear, it's just that sentence, I just miss him so much, or I just miss her so much. And there's just nothing quite like Christmas and the holidays to turn up the volume of that missing. You know, there are probably dozens of ways to handle, if you will, the holidays, just dozens of ways. And some people choose to ignore that completely. Just ignore Christmas completely. They don't decorate, they don't celebrate, they don't buy presents, they don't go to parties, they refuse to sing the carols. It's just too much to be able to do any of that. Some people go to the other extreme and they work too much. They almost drown the pain of the missing inactivity in work, in accomplishing goals, a different kind of denial. If the person who refuses to participate has one kind of a denial, then the person who is overworking and overextending themselves another way has a different kind of denial. But both of them have the same goal. Make it don't hurt. Make the pain not so great. Some people do just, as little as possible. They just do the bare minimum because that's the way that they're going to be able to get through. Some people find a middle ground and they participate in some things, but not all things. There are some people who have decided that they don't want to disappoint their family, and so they're going to try to find some way to do some of the family traditions, some of the family things that have always been special. And then there are some people really who go at it full bore. I mean, their loved one loved Christmas, and so the way that they feel like that they can honor and observe and even celebrate their loved one is to jump into it with everything. All the decorating, all the baking, all the shopping, all the parties, everything the way it always was. And the point is, there isn't any one right way. And so for those of you who are experiencing fresh grief, you need to know that there is no one way. There's not any one pathway that you can follow on how to observe or handle the holidays. And that's really okay. And that's particularly true when grief is fresh and raw. And so tonight I want to talk to you kind of on two levels. I want to give you some practical advice about maybe what you do. And then I want to talk to you about who you are in this process and what God might be saying to you this particular season. So it's kind of dark, and you might not be able to take any notes, but if you can always ask me later for what I said, and I'll tell it to you again. In the practical advice of things that you do, the very first thing I would tell you is that it's critical that you take care of yourself during the holidays. I think particularly for women, it is a time when we are urgently trying to take care of everybody else. I don't think that's a surprise to any woman in this room that women tend to work a little bit harder on Christmas than men do. I'm not casting any blame or any aspersions. I'm just saying that studies have shown women tend to work a little more at Christmas than men. And so I think women in particular need that advice, to take care of yourself and to take care of the grief that you're experiencing. Because grief and trauma don't just affect our minds. Grief and trauma doesn't just affect our thoughts or our emotions. Grief and trauma affect our bodies. There's a book that says the body keeps the score. And that's very true. When you are in grief, when you've experienced trauma, when you are under extreme tension, under pressure, then your body starts to keep score. And so for you to be very careful to nurture yourself during this time is critical. And by take care of yourself, I'm not saying eat that extra piece of fudge. I'm not saying eat that extra piece of fruitcake. I've already tried it. It doesn't work, and it doesn't make the pain go away. So it's a really ineffective strategy, but I have to confess that I have tried to make some of the pain go away by eating, and it doesn't work. But what I am saying is that this is a really critical time for you to get a little more sleep. This is a really critical time for you to maybe take an extra walk, not for exercise per se, but just because of what it does for your mind and your body. This is a time maybe to find a place that you can get, a cheap massage. Or at the very least, ask a trusted loved one or friend, somebody to just massage your shoulders or your hands or your feet. Because there's something about a very gentle touch that is comforting to grief. I know that the very first time I got a massage after Matthew died, it was several months, and I didn't care about anything, but somebody suggested that to me. They gave me a gift certificate, and I got a massage, and I sobbed through the entire massage, face down on the table, and I'm sobbing. And it surprised me because I had actually felt very numb going in. But just the way that God has wired us to receive comfort through human touch, it was amazing. And so as you're looking to take care of yourself, that's one of the things I would suggest to you. And this may sound like the most well, duh kind of piece of advice ever, but I want to encourage you to really pay attention to your breathing. Because when we're under stress, when we're grieving, when we're feeling anxious, we don't always notice it, but we start to breathe very shallow. We're breathing kind of up here in the top part of our chest because we're feeling so tense, we're feeling so anxious, we're feeling so pressured, we're feeling such pain, and we tend to breathe just right here, and it just perpetuates that tenseness and that anxiety. And to instead practice sitting maybe in a chair, closing your eyes, and just calmly, very gently taking very deep breaths, 3 deep breaths, and then letting them out slowly, and then doing a few more of those, just very even in and out breathing. It was one of the pieces of advice that somebody gave me soon after Matthew died, and I instantly discarded it because I thought it was just a little stupid. Because what do you mean keep breathing? I am breathing. I'm not even sure I want to be breathing, but I am breathing. But as the time has gone by, I've seen the wisdom of that, of just quietly bringing down the tension, of quietly bringing down the anxiety, quietly bringing down those moments where you think, I am completely and utterly overwhelmed by emotion in this moment. That kind of breathing is really adds some peace into our lives. Some of you that are on medication, maybe with depression and anxiety, that this might be the time to actually up it for a month or two, to give yourself a little more, what I call another layer of skin. Just another layer of skin that allows you to get through a difficult time as the holidays without completely falling apart. And then to get in the sun for about 10 minutes. We're so fortunate here in Southern California that we have the sun almost every single day. And the benefits of being in the sun. Again, it sounds so simple, but when you've lost someone and you really can't even think which shoe goes on which foot, and brushing your teeth that's a successful day, to practice some of these ways of taking care of yourself really can give you resilience in the difficult times of the holidays. Then about holiday activities, people, particularly those in the first few years after losing someone, which holiday activities do you participate in? Which ones do you not? And I would say, if I had a piece of advice, it would be this: do whatever you can tolerate. So if you can tolerate going to the mall and listening to, the same carols sung every 5 minutes, if you can tolerate having people kind of rushing past you and into the stores because you want to be with your family or your friends, and you can tolerate it, do it. If you can tolerate decorating your tree, if you can tolerate decorating your house, if you can tolerate going to the office party, if you can tolerate, in other words, fill in the blank, whatever it is, if you can tolerate it, then there's actually something good about being able to still participate in life and in those holiday events. But if you can't tolerate it, if it actually makes it more painful, if it makes it feel like I just simply can't do it, then that's the moment to listen to yourself and give yourself that permission to say, you know what, I don't think I can do that this year. And then next year, as it rolls around, you push yourself a little bit and you try again. And you find out if your tolerance has increased. One of the mottos that I live by, that Rick and I live by now in these years of grief and adjusting to living without Matthew, is this: when you can, you will. When you can, you will. For me, for instance, at Saddleback, all the years that we've been there, I sat on the front row. I sat on the front row partially to give Rick the stink eye when he was saying things that I didn't want him to say, but mostly because it encouraged him to have me sitting on the front row. It encouraged him. It made him feel connected to me. It made him feel like that he wasn't up there alone. So for years, I've sat on the front row to support Rick. After Matthew died, I found it unbearable to sit on the front row. I found that it was intolerable to think and to know that there were people with good hearts, but still they were watching me. They were watching to see how I responded to this song, or how I responded to that song, or how I responded. At least I thought that's what they were doing, and it was intolerable. And so I moved toward the back of a section at Lake Forest campus where I felt safe, where I felt not watched, where I felt like I can do this, and where I felt like if I needed to get out of a service because I was overwhelmed, I could leave. It took a year and a half before I tried again to sit on the front row at Saddleback at Lake Forest. And I did it because Rick told me that he was missing me being there. He wasn't pressuring me. I didn't think I was ready, and I told him I didn't think I was ready. And his response was so kind. It was like, well, that's okay, hon. I was just telling you what I was feeling. But if it's not good for you yet, it's okay. And so I decided that because I knew he needed me in that moment, I decided that night to try to sit on the front row. And I had a couple of people around me so that I wasn't there by myself. And I found that I could do it. I cried my way through it, but that's okay. That's all right. You can stand and worship God with a broken heart. That's all right. And I found that because I pushed myself a little bit, I found that I could do it. Obviously, I didn't feel I was ready to come back to the worship center at the ranch. And I wouldn't have chosen to come back to the worship center at the ranch. In God's weird and incredibly mysterious ways, he knew that this is where I would be tonight. So obviously, God thought that I needed a nudge. I'll survive. I'm going to get through this. Maybe from this moment, I'll be able to come back to this building again. The point is, as you are going through grief, as you are going through the holidays, it's so important to give yourself that permission to know that when you can, you will. And that you don't let other people pressure you. Rick didn't pressure me. He told me how he felt. He gave me all the grace, all the time I needed, but he just told me what he was feeling. I decided that I wanted to respond to it in that way. But nobody else can pressure you into feeling something before you're ready to feel it. Nobody can pressure you into doing something that you don't feel ready to do. And that's really okay, particularly in the holidays. But I would say this. Think of something maybe this holiday season that you have not been able to do yet. Just take a step toward it. Try it. If you can't do it yet, it's okay. No shame, no guilt. Try again next year, because when you can, you will. Giving back to others is really important. Can I go back for just 1 second? Because I want to say this. When it comes to like holiday dinners, every family needs to pay attention to that family. So I can't tell you how your family should celebrate like Christmas dinner. Some families do something very elaborate. I've heard of, they do all kinds of elaborate things to bring that loved one into the picture. Maybe there's photos, maybe there's particular food that person liked, maybe there's an empty chair. I mean, people do different things. And some families need a little more subtle approach than that. And again, pay attention to your family. And then I would say find a way to give back to others, because sometimes one of the ways that helps us cope with really deep grief is to find a way to give back to somebody else. It becomes a way of healing, to take the focus in small ways or large ways off of just our pain if you do it in the name or in the honor of this person that you love, it becomes actually a way of healing. It becomes a way of extending that person's life, and it calls attention to them in a way that honors them and allows you to find some healing for yourself. This Halloween, I actually hate Halloween. Sorry for those of you who love it. I just don't like Halloween. Matthew loved Halloween, and he loved to dress up in a costume and hand out candy. And so this Halloween, all I wanted to do was actually turn the lights off in my house, sit there with the TV on, but nobody would know I was home. And I bought the candy. Actually, Rick bought candy. Massive thing of candy. We don't even have kids in our neighborhood anymore. Why you bought a massive thing? I don't know. Costco, I don't know. I decided that I was going to hand out candy because Matthew would have loved it. And so I gave candy out to the people who came because of Matthew. It wasn't for me. It didn't do anything for me, but it was a way of remembering. And so you can give back to others in a way, and that actually brings some healing to you. What if you're angry at God? What if the holiday season actually stirs up some of the emotions that you're able to keep at a lower level the rest of the year? Maybe Christmas stirs up those angry feelings of why? Why, God? Why? Why is my loved one not here? Why did they die? Why did they leave me? Why are they not here? And those kind of very angry feelings are so normal. They're so normal. Please don't feel guilty if you're struggling with that and then thinking that you're a terrible Christian, thinking that you're a person of no faith. What kind of a Christian are you that you're mad at God over the death of someone that you love dearly? Hey, listen, God can handle it. God can handle your anger. He can handle your grief. He can handle your accusations. He can handle your doubts. It doesn't mean you're a terrible Christian. It means that you are a human being experiencing deep pain. I think God would much rather have us come at him with our anger than to turn our back and walk away. So I would say if you find yourself experiencing some anger, some resentment, some frustration, some doubt, some very uncomfortable feelings toward God in your grief, don't run away from him. Run to him. Shout if you need to. Bang on his chest if you need to. Yell a little, scream a little. He can even handle some cursing. I'm sorry, don't hate me, but I think that God can handle when we seek him in relationship. So if that's what you're feeling this particular Christmas, God can handle it. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about the place where I feel like we can find some hope. There's some practical ways. I was trying to say, look, if you're, this is a hard season, and you need some tips, you need some suggestions of how to get through it on a practical level. But then there's also the heart piece of where sometimes we feel so empty and devoid of hope. Advent has become for me an amazing comfort. I didn't grow up in a church that talked about Advent, and so it's something that I've discovered more late in my life. And so for those of you that really aren't familiar, that like me didn't grow up in a church that talked about Advent, Advent means coming or arrival. And it's meant to remind us that Jesus is coming back. He is going to come again. He is going to arrive back here on this very broken planet. And it also allows us an opportunity to look backwards and say, he did come. He's already come once. And if he came once, he'll keep his promise and he'll come again. And I love the different Sundays of Advent. The Sunday that was just passed was the Sunday that talks about hope. This coming Sunday is the Sunday that speaks of faith. The third Sunday in Advent is the Sunday that speaks of joy. And the last Sunday of Advent is the Sunday that speaks of peace. Like I said, it starts with that looking to the fact that he's coming back, that there's something to look forward to with great expectation. And I don't think I can, well, maybe I can. I was going to say I don't think I can read it very well in the dark. But in the Old Testament, in Isaiah 65, there's a prophecy of what's going to happen when the Messiah comes and what it will be like. God says, look, Isaiah 65, verse 17. Look, I am creating new heavens and a new earth, so wonderful that no one will ever even think about the old ones anymore. Be glad. Rejoice forever in my creation. And look, I will create Jerusalem as a place of happiness. Her people will be a source of joy. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people, and the sound of weeping and crying will be heard no more. And then in Revelation, New Testament, you know this one. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a beautiful bride prepared for her husband. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, look, the home of God is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will remove all of their sorrows, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. For the old world and its evils are gone forever. And the one sitting on the throne said, look, I am making all things new. For me, looking ahead to living every single day of the rest of my life without Matthew sometimes is more than I can bear. If you've lost a child, you know what I'm talking about. But to know that God in the Old Testament promised that he would create, that there would be a new heaven and new earth, and there would be no weeping and no sorrow. And then in the New Testament, again, we're reassured, hey, it's coming. And it's a place where there won't be any death and no sorrow and no tears and no crying. It's just all throughout the scripture, God saying that death will be abolished, tears will be abolished, justice will finally be done perfectly. It's a great day that's coming when he'll come and he'll make everything right, and everything broken will be repaired, and everything that was stolen from you will be returned, and everything that's been destroyed in your life will be rebuilt. In The Lord of the Rings, one of my favorite characters, Sam, says to Gandalf the wizard, Gandalf reappears, and Sam thinks Gandalf has died, but suddenly Gandalf is there, and Sam says, wait, I thought you were dead. I thought I was dead. Does this mean that all sad things will become untrue? And Gandalf says, absolutely. Well, to me, the comfort of that, to know that all the sad things of this life, including the death, the suicide of my son, that will become untrue. It will become reversed. And everything, the molestation that I experienced, the losses, everything in your life that was stolen or taken or has been removed from you that you didn't want it, every person, the Bible says that all those sad things will become untrue, and that is a day to hope for. So Advent also speaks of the fact that Jesus has already come and he's already pierced our world with his presence. 2,000 years ago, he invaded our world, and the message paraphrase, Buddy quoted it on Sunday, is Jesus has invaded the neighborhood. He's come into our lives, our homes, our hearts. And so we don't have to just wait for what is coming. He's already come, and between the knowing that he's already come and that same God has promised to come again, that gives us hope for today. The world that Jesus was born into was a pretty cruel world. It was a world in which his people had been oppressed. They were at the bottom rung of society. The Roman Empire had conquered them, and they were poor and they were oppressed. And what was even worse than their physical poverty was the spiritual poverty. God had been silent for 400 years. God had not spoken to them for 400 years. They didn't know if he'd ever speak again. They didn't know if they'd ever hear from him. Had he finally given up on them? Had he finally decided that they were just not they were not redeemable, and that he had moved on? And it was into that silent world, that spiritual silence, that Jesus came. That the Christmas song that we sing, Silent Night, it was silent not because there wasn't a lot going on the hillside, that's part of it, but it was mostly because for 400 years, God had been silent. And suddenly there was light and sound, and he was here and he spoke to them. And it was the winter, if you will, of their lives. It was the winter of their despair, their winter of their spiritual angst of, had God left them? And when Jesus came, he brought the life and the hope that, yes, God was still with them. I want to give you a very tangible example of this. Joy, if you'll bring me those things. And those of you that are passing out the poems, if you would pass those out. And I think we have enough for everybody. I hope so. So I want you to, you probably can't see this, but this is an amaryllis plant. An amaryllis bulb. Any of you gardeners know what an amaryllis does? I really can't see you, so you're going to have to raise your hands really big. Okay, great. Some of you know. So an amaryllis is this incredible flower that you see here. This is an amaryllis, and it blooms in winter. But to get it to bloom again, this is mine from last year. At some point, you have to cut off all the leaves, and you have to take it down to the bulb. And then you have to take that bulb and you have to put it in the dark. And so this summer, I cut off all the leaves of my amaryllis plant, and I scraped the dirt and the sod away from it, and I put it in a paper bag, and it stayed in a paper bag in the darkness of my closet. And just a few weeks ago, I took it out, I cleaned off what remained of the dirt, I replanted it, I made sure that this was cut, and now I am waiting for the amaryllis to bloom again. This plant blooms at Christmas. And the beauty of that, you have the words to one of Christine Knockel's songs, and I'm going to butcher it in terms of reading poetry. I'm not a good poetry reader, and I'm certainly not a singer, so you're just going to have to tolerate me reading it. But her words talk about an amaryllis, and she says, talk about a winter the world had never known. Talk about a silence that hardened up the soil. No more life left in Eden, but you knew the time would come because you were growing up a family that you would call your own. And through a fragile people, the light of life would come. And when it seemed like we'd never see spring, heaven gave a king. Like an amaryllis blooming at Christmas, when everything was cold and dark, your love broke through. And you shined with the brilliance of summer right in the middle of winter. You came, Jesus, surprising the night like a Christmas amaryllis. Here I am, waiting in a winter of my own. If it's going to be this cold here, why couldn't it just snow? At least I could say through the pain that it's somehow beautiful. And everybody knows that the time to bloom is spring. But you're asking me to break through the hardness of this freeze. And you say that you're with me, and I can make it through anything. Like an amaryllis blooming at Christmas, when everything is cold and dark, your love breaks through, and I shine with the brilliance of summer, right in the middle of winter. Somehow surprising the night like a Christmas amaryllis. There are the rare and beautiful treasures that grow while it's coldest, when nobody's watching, sending a message to a sleeping world that you are here with us now, and you are making all things new again, like an amaryllis blooming at Christmas. When everything is cold and dark, your love breaks through and you shine with the brilliance of summer right in the middle of winter. Ever surprising the night like a Christmas amaryllis, you're still surprising the night like a Christmas amaryllis. Some of you, I can tell you, for myself, there's a winter in my heart. 4.5 years may seem like a long time, but to me it's a blink of the eye. And there is a coldness still in my heart. This fall has been difficult, a difficult grieving season. And I find my heart a little numb and definitely a little frozen. And so tonight was actually a moment of where the frozen heart unfroze. But I have to believe that wherever you are in what's going on in your life, where there is a darkness of winter, where your heart has become frozen with grief or with stress or with longing or with loss, that God is asking this incredible thing he's asking of us. He is asking us to bloom in winter. It's like, doesn't he get it? Things bloom in spring. They don't bloom in winter. They don't bloom when the ground is hard, when it's cold, when our hearts are frozen. But God says, because I'm coming, because I've come already, I've walked into your neighborhood, I've walked into your life, I've walked into your heart. I'm here. I'm with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm always going to be with you. And someday, physically, I will return, and I will repair what's been broken, and I will return what has been stolen, and all sad things will become untrue because we believe that, because it's what the Bible teaches us, because it's what Jesus has said and promised from the Old to the New Testament. Then you and I have an opportunity, even when our souls and our hearts are frozen, to let God work into our lives so that this frozen thing that sat in the dark, covered up in the dark for months, we can believe that this will be us. This will be us. Not just in the future, but even today. Even today, you can bloom in the cold of winter because Jesus has come with his light. Let me just pray for you. God, I would be the last to pretend like I understand all your ways, because I don't. Frequently, you mystify me, and you surprise me in ways that I don't like. And you ask really hard things. You ask that we show joy in the face of sorrow, that we bloom in the winter and not wait for spring. You ask that we believe what we cannot see. You ask us to trust when it feels the exact opposite of what's reasonable. You ask us to believe that you're coming again. And so, God, I don't know where most of the people in this room are spiritually. I don't know where they are in their lives. I don't know where the grief is. I don't know where the loss is. I don't know where their hearts have become frozen. I don't know where they're afraid to trust, to let you stir in that cold, hard soil so that they can bloom again. I don't know that. And I don't really have to, because you do. God, we are known by you. You get us. There's nothing about us that is a mystery. Every single person sitting here tonight is known intimately by you. Your hands formed and shaped each man, each woman. Before they were ever made their entrance into this world in their mother's wombs, you knew them, you loved them, you loved us. You knew that I'd be standing here tonight with a broken heart, asking you why. You knew that I couldn't do this on my own. But you are the God who was there. You are the God that was there. You promised there would be a day in which all would be repaired, all sad things would become untrue, that you would help us to bloom in the winter of our lives. So God, with Some will come to you in anger, some with doubt, some with just broken hearts, some with just the tiniest faith statements. But you meet us exactly in those places. You allow us to be real with you. You allow us to tell you what's in our hearts because you know it anyway. We don't have to pretend. We don't have to look good for anybody else. But in just the moment, this honest moment, God, I pray for the comfort of my brothers and sisters who are aching, who are longing and missing and grieving. Give us courage to do those practical things of challenging ourselves to take tiny steps of healing, to see if we're ready, and then to accept with grace and no shame or guilt if we're not quite there, and to celebrate those tiny steps of healing. God, I pray that these friends, these brothers and sisters, will be surrounded by love at this time, by compassionate people who will hear their heartache, receive their tears, and remind them that we can bloom in the wintertime because of Jesus. Jesus, thank you for invading our world. Thank you for invading my neighborhood, for coming into my heart. Thank you for hope that can spring alive again, afresh, every day. You are our light. You are our life. We love you.